Tonight, I want you to sit with a discomfort that most people will run from. A truth so old, so deeply rooted in the human animal, that we've buried it beneath social rules, dating advice, psychology trends, and all the cheap language of modern love. Plato believed that sex is never just sex, never just biology, never just pleasure, never just attachment. He believed sex reveals the truth of your soul, because sex strips away everything else: your reputation, your posture, your intellect, your carefully constructed mask. Sex shows who you are when your guard is gone. And that is why Plato feared it, revered it, and distrusted it all at once. Sexual desire is the only thing that can make a wise man stupid in seconds, a disciplined man reckless in minutes, and a whole city erupt into chaos before dawn. People have destroyed marriages, armies, governments, friendships, and themselves, all because of desire they pretended they were controlling. Plato looked at that chaos and asked a question we still refuse to face. What do we become when the body takes the throne? This episode will be brutal, honest, uncomfortable. And if you stay with me, it will reveal something about yourself, something you've been avoiding. Welcome to Night Scholar. Let's begin. To understand Plato's philosophy of sex, you must first enter his world. Not the sanitized, academic version, but the real, vicious, erotic Athens of the 4th century BCE. A city where sex was never neutral, never private, and never morally straightforward. Desire wasn't a hobby, desire was a political force. A beautiful youth could become a weapon, a lover could become a rival, a sexual scandal could ignite a civil war, topple alliances, or stain a family name for generations. This is the world where a general seduced another man's lover, only to have his wife seduced in retaliation, an act so humiliating that it sparked a full-scale political revolt. This is the world where Alcibiades, Socrates' dangerously gifted, dangerously beautiful former lover, brought prostitutes into his home until his wife attempted to divorce him in fury. This is a world where male-male relationships existed alongside marriage, but carried emotional and social storms that could reshape the structure of a city. Plato saw all of this. He saw how sex could enslave a man with the illusion that he was in control. He watched brilliant men lose themselves because their bodies whispered louder than their reason. He watched desire twist friendships, alliances, and political factions into knots the mind could not unravel. So when Plato writes about sex, he is not writing as a moralist. He's writing as a survivor of a dangerous world, one where desire, if not mastered, would master you. Plato believed that there are two opposing forces driving every act of love: the desire to use the beloved for pleasure, the desire to honour the beloved and lift them toward virtue. He believed every lover is torn between these two impulses, sometimes within the same breath. You desire the person, yes, but you also desire the feeling they give you. You want closeness, but you want control. You want their touch, but you fear their power over your heart. You want their admiration, but you envy their freedom. Plato believed most people never tell this truth out loud. We love others for who they are and for what they give us. And often those two things are in conflict. The bad lover, Plato writes, wants the beloved weak, easier to manipulate, easier to impress, easier to possess. This lover fears the beloved's growth because growth threatens control. The good lover, in contrast, wants the beloved powerful, wiser, stronger, more independent, because true love rejoices in the beloved's excellence. But here is Plato's most radical claim. The same person can be both lovers at once. Inside you, he says, live two forces. One that wants pleasure, one that wants goodness. And every romantic or sexual moment you experience is a referendum on which part of you is winning. This is why Plato thinks love is inherently dangerous. Not because desire is immoral, but because desire reveals which version of yourself you obey. A man who cannot control his appetite cannot control his destiny. Plato didn't fear sex because it's sinful. He feared sex because it bypasses reason. Sex is the only appetite strong enough to turn a philosopher into a fool, a disciplined athlete into a compulsive addict, a loyal friend into a liar, a powerful ruler into a self-sabotaging child. To Plato, sex is concentrated human power, and power without reason is fire in a dry forest. Sex sharpens your longing. It dissolves your caution. It exposes your cravings. It reveals your hidden dependencies. It collapses your rational mind into a single, overwhelming instinct. Plato saw sexual desire as a force that exposes the truth behind the illusion of self-control. Most people don't control their appetites. They negotiate with them. Sex, he believed, doesn't ask permission. It consumes. This is why Plato argued that lovers must confront their desires with discipline, not to suppress passion, but to transform it into something worthy of being called love. To him, sex is not dangerous because the body is sinful, but because the mind is fragile. In the Phaedrus, Plato gives one of the greatest metaphors in all of philosophy. The soul is a chariot with two horses, one noble, one wild, driven by a charioteer struggling to keep control. The noble horse seeks truth, beauty, goodness. The wild horse lunges toward pleasure, gratification, dominance. The charioteer, the rational mind, tries desperately to hold them together. A lover sees someone beautiful. The noble horse is moved toward reverence or inspiration. The wild horse wants the body now. And here is the drama. Most people let the wild horse run until the chariot snaps. The philosophical lover, Plato's ideal, does not kill the wild horse but trains it, reshapes the desire, redirects it, channels it into admiration rather than consumption. Passion remains, but it becomes energy for growth, not destruction. To Plato, the greatest lovers are not the most obedient or the most restrained. They are the ones who can ride their desire without letting it derail them. A person who cannot master desire is mastered by it. A person who cannot master themselves cannot love anyone. Plato believed human beings are far more fragile than we pretend to be. We walk with straight backs, steady voices, confident words. But beneath that surface lives a battlefield of impulses, urges, cravings, and fears that we barely understand. Sexual desire, he argued, magnifies all of them. Pleasure makes promises it cannot keep, whispering to the mind, just this once, just this moment. No one needs to know. Nothing will change. But everything changes. Pleasure alters the equilibrium of the soul. It stretches a boundary, erodes a restraint, and cracks the structure of self-control piece by piece. Plato wasn't afraid of pleasure because he was a moralist. He was afraid of pleasure because he understood human weakness. He believed our desires are like water. They always seek the quickest path, the easiest slope, the softest ground. And if you let desire carve the channels of your character, you will not be the one steering your life anymore. To Plato, pleasure must be mistrusted, not because it is evil, but because it is unprincipled. It has no loyalty to the soul. It will abandon you the moment it burns out, leaving you with the consequences it never plans to carry. A person ruled by pleasure is unreliable, impulsive, and inconsistent. Not because they lack intelligence, but because every decision becomes filtered through appetite. And appetite, Plato insisted, does not have a conscience. It does not care about your reputation, your commitments, your long-term goals, or your highest virtues. It cares only about itself, its cravings, its satisfactions, its temporary relief. That is why Plato believed that a life directed by pleasure is always a life drifting toward chaos. Not immediately, but inevitably. In the Symposium, Plato delivers one of the most misunderstood teachings in the history of philosophy: the ladder of love. Modern readers often treat it like a poetic metaphor, but Plato meant it as a psychological map. Love, he believed, begins with the body, because beauty begins with the body. When you see a beautiful person, you don't first fall in love with their intelligence, their moral values, or their worldview. You fall for their face, their voice, their gestures, The way they move in a room, Plato saw that clearly. But he insisted that if you stop there, if the body becomes the end rather than the beginning, you become a prisoner of your impulses. Plato's ladder begins with a desire for a single body, but the lover who remains at that stage becomes obsessive, jealous, demanding, or dependent. The next step is recognizing the beauty in many bodies, which breaks the illusion that beauty belongs to just one person. Then comes the realization that the soul is far more beautiful than the body. Its courage, its kindness, its discipline, its depth. From there, the lover ascends toward beautiful customs, beautiful ideas, and beautiful knowledge. And finally, the lover glimpses the form of beauty itself, the pure, unchanging essence behind every particular thing that inspires longing. Plato is not telling you to detach from physical attraction. He is telling you to transcend it. The body is the door, not the destination. Desire is the spark, not the fire. If love does not grow upward, it will collapse downward. And Plato feared nothing more than the collapse of a soul that could have risen but chose instead to spiral into hunger. Plato understood something modern psychology is only now beginning to articulate. Lovers do not just love each other, they shape each other, they elevate each other or diminish each other. They expand the other's soul or shrink it. And most people, Plato observed, do not want their lover to become stronger. They want their lover to become compliant. The pleasure-driven lover, as Plato described, seeks to keep the beloved dependent, insecure, isolated and malleable. Such a lover does not want competition. They do not want self-respect. They do not want independence, because independence weakens control. This is why Plato believed that the pleasure-driven lover becomes jealous of the beloved's growth. A lover who grows in wisdom becomes harder to manipulate. A lover who grows in confidence becomes harder to claim. A lover who grows in strength becomes harder to dominate. And so the pleasure-driven lover subtly discourages improvement. They mock ambition. They resent friendships. They undermine discipline. They pretend to protect but really confine. They offer affection but demand obedience. They insist on closeness but fear equality. In this way, desire becomes a weapon, not by intention but by nature. Plato's insight is cruelly accurate. When someone loves you for your pleasure, they will hate anything that threatens their access to it, and nothing threatens access more than your growth. Plato's chariot metaphor is not an ancient exaggeration. It is a blueprint for modern life. The wild horse pulls you toward instant gratification, texting someone you know you shouldn't, obsessively checking social media for validation, falling back into cycles of lust or compulsion, mistaking intensity for intimacy. The noble horse pulls you toward discipline, choosing partners who respect your boundaries, maintaining self-control under temptation, speaking truth instead of performing charm, honouring commitments instead of chasing thrills. Most people live with a broken chariot. The horses drag them in opposite directions, while the charioteer, their rational mind, hangs on by a thread. This is why people return to relationships they know are destructive, why they confuse desire with destiny, why they sabotage long-term connections for short-term indulgences. Plato understood that the war inside us is not between good and evil, it is between now and later, between appetite and aspiration, between the body we inhabit and the soul we are trying to build. To Plato, the measure of a person is not which desires they feel, but which desires they obey. Plato's fear wasn't sex, it was addiction. He believed sexual pleasure was the most intense bodily pleasure available, and therefore the most capable of overwhelming the rational mind. When you feed the appetite repeatedly, it does not remain satisfied, it grows hungrier. Each indulgence raises the threshold for the next. What once delighted you becomes insufficient. What once tempted you becomes necessary. What once merely distracted you becomes a pattern you cannot break. Plato compared uncontrolled desire to filling a jar with holes. No matter how much you pour in, it drains out and demands more. A person dominated by sexual appetite becomes restless, dissatisfied, unable to sit in silence, unable to feel at peace. They chase stimulation to quiet the mind, and in doing so, lose the ability to steer their life. This is why Plato argued that the pursuit of sexual pleasure without restraint is self-sabotaging. It consumes the strength that should be used for building character, for creating excellence, for forming meaningful bonds. It fragments the soul. It fractures the will. It makes a person a servant to their impulses, forever chasing, forever wanting, forever empty. Plato understood something modern culture avoids. Being desired is not always a blessing. Sometimes it is a trap. When someone desires you intensely, their longing can feel intoxicating. It validates your ego, shores up your insecurities, and gives you a sense of power you may not have earned. But Plato warns that this kind of desire often blinds you to motive. A lover who wants you excessively rarely wants what's best for you. They want access, they want possession, they want the emotional high your presence provides. And in seeking those things, they may try to shape you into the version of yourself they can control. Plato believed that the beloved, especially the young, impressionable beloved, is in greater danger than the lover, because the beloved, flattered and inexperienced, may mistake intensity for sincerity. To Plato, desire from another person is not validation, it is responsibility. When someone wants you with great force, they are handing you power over their happiness. But that power is heavy. It can crush you if you do not wield it with clarity. Plato teaches that a lover ruled by pleasure cannot help but shape the beloved into a smaller person. Insecure, dependent, afraid of displeasing the lover. And if the beloved does not understand the difference between being loved and being used, they may willingly surrender their autonomy. Desire becomes a subtle erosion of judgment, of self-trust, of inner strength. To be desired is not dangerous. To build your identity on being desired is catastrophic. Plato was uncompromising about one thing. Most people do not love well. Not because they are malicious, but because they are untrained. The average person does not examine their attraction, their expectations, or their intentions. They fall into relationships the way someone falls into a current, swept by emotion, pushed by loneliness, pulled by desire, without ever asking where the river is carrying them. Plato believed that unexamined love leads to suffering, because the lovers themselves are unclear about what they seek. One wants validation, the other wants comfort. One wants admiration, the other wants control. Most lovers think they are pursuing connection when they are actually pursuing relief from inner wounds. Plato insists that love without self-knowledge becomes chaos. The lover does not know why he reaches for the beloved. The beloved does not know why she feels compelled to stay. They become entangled in each other's needs without understanding their own. This is why Plato criticizes the pleasure-driven lover, not for feeling desire, but for refusing to interrogate it. Desire without reflection becomes exploitation. Love without reflection becomes dependency. In Plato's eyes, the tragedy of most relationships is not that they fail, but that they were never truly grounded in anything stable to begin with. People don't fall out of love. They fall out of illusions. Plato draws a line so sharp that modern readers often miss its severity. Loving the body is not the same as loving the soul. To love someone's body is to love what can be lost: youth, beauty, shape, novelty. To love someone's soul is to love what endures: character, wisdom, courage, compassion. Plato does not condemn physical attraction. He simply refuses to let it be the foundation of a relationship. For him, the body is the spark that ignites love, but the soul is the fire that sustains it. According to Plato, the lover who loves the body alone is doomed to dissatisfaction. The beloved will age, or disappoint, or become ordinary in the lover's eyes. Desire will fade because desire depends on scarcity, novelty, and intensity. But the lover who loves the soul is drawn to something that grows over time rather than decays. A soul can deepen, expand, mature, and elevate. The beauty of character does not wither. In Plato's framework, the lover must ask themselves a painful question. If this person lost everything external, beauty, status, health, would I still love them? If the answer is no, then the attraction was not love, it was consumption. Plato demands that love aim at the improvement of both people. If you are not becoming wiser, more disciplined, more courageous, more truthful because of the person you love, then what you have is not love in Plato's sense. It is emotional appetite, dressed up as romance. Here we reach one of Plato's most uncomfortable claims. What you desire exposes who you are. If you are drawn to people who treat you poorly, Plato would say it is because you have not learned to value your own soul. If you are attracted to those who are chaotic, unreliable, or self-serving, Plato would say your own inner world is in disorder. If you repeatedly choose partners based on intensity rather than virtue, it means you are ruled by appetite rather than reason. Plato does not let you blame your patterns on bad luck or toxic partners. He insists, your attractions are mirrors. Look into them. Plato believed that noble people desire what is noble. They seek partners who elevate them, challenge them, refine them. They are repelled by manipulation and enticed by excellence. But those who have not cultivated their inner life are drawn to what is familiar, not what is good. They confuse excitement with connection. They mistake anxiety for passion. They interpret chaos as chemistry because they have not yet disciplined their desires. Thus, for Plato, the question, why do I keep choosing the wrong people, is not a question about them, it is a question about you. Plato saw sexual intimacy not as an equal exchange, but as a transfer of power. When two people share their bodies, something psychological happens beneath the level of awareness. One person begins to want more than the other can give. One person becomes increasingly vulnerable. One person begins to shape their identity around the relationship. Plato understood that sex creates an imbalance, not because one person intends harm, but because the act itself is emotionally potent. The danger in Plato's view lies in this. Sex binds the soul before the soul is ready. It creates attachment before virtue. It creates dependency before trust. It accelerates intimacy faster than character can support it. Plato believed that when bodies connect too soon, the soul lags behind, confused and overwhelmed. The result is a bond that feels powerful but is structurally unstable. Lovers cling to each other, not because they understand each other, but because their bodies have created echoes their minds cannot process. To Plato, sex is not inherently corrupting, but it is inherently destabilizing unless guided by reason. And most people do not have the self-clarity to navigate that destabilization without being ruled by it. If Plato walked into modern life, with its apps, casual encounters, performative dating, and algorithmic attraction, he would not moralize. He would diagnose. He would say that we have built a culture ruled entirely by appetite, swipe-based desire, instant gratification, low-commitment intimacy, and a collective avoidance of introspection. Plato would argue that most people today do not seek lovers. They seek distraction. Not connection, but stimulation. Not companionship, but relief. He would claim that modern dating culture encourages the wild horse within us while starving the noble horse. It rewards impulsivity rather than discernment. It encourages the pursuit of bodies rather than souls. It prioritizes novelty over depth. Plato's critique would not be that casual sex is immoral. His critique would be that casual sex masks the fear of looking inward. When intimacy becomes a commodity, people become addicted to the chase because they are terrified of the stillness where their flaws would be exposed. Plato would ask the modern person a piercing question. If you removed sex from your relationships, would anything remain? If the answer is no, then he would say, you have not yet learned to love. You have only learned to pursue pleasure. To understand Plato's philosophy of love, one must first understand the battlefield inside the human mind. Plato believed that every person is a chariot being pulled by two horses. one noble, disciplined, and striving upward toward meaning. The other wild, impulsive, and desperate for pleasure. The noble horse longs for truth, self-control, and virtue. The wild horse craves indulgence, stimulation, and immediate gratification. And you, the charioteer, are caught between them, forced to steer a soul that wants two opposite lives at once. Plato sees love, especially erotic love, as the moment when these two internal forces collide with the greatest violence. The beloved becomes a mirror into which both horses gaze. One sees opportunity for transcendence, the other sees opportunity for satisfaction. Plato believed that anyone who claims to be good at love simply has not recognized how dangerous love is. Love exposes the cracks inside you. It does not create chaos, it reveals the chaos that was already there. When desire is awakened, the wild horse lunges forward, dragging the charioteer into fantasy, projection, and obsession. The noble horse tries to pull upward, urging patience, depth, and moral clarity. Thus, to Plato, the experience of falling in love is not romantic. It is agonizing. It is the sensation of being split between who you want to be and who your impulses tell you to become. And until you learn to control your inner horses, love will conquer you long before you ever learn to conquer love. Plato understood that desire distorts perception. When you want someone intensely, you begin to hallucinate virtues they do not possess. You reinterpret their indifference as mystery, their instability as passion, their unpredictability as depth. This is not because the beloved is deceiving you, it is because your appetite is deceiving you. Plato insists that when the appetitive part of the soul gains momentum, it hijacks reason and forces the mind to participate in its fantasy. The lover interprets everything the beloved does as a sign, a symbol, a message. The beloved becomes elevated, idealized, mythologized. To Plato, the danger of desire is not that it pulls you towards someone unworthy. The danger is that it blinds you to who they actually are. You do not love the person, you love your projection of them. And when that projection collapses, the relationship collapses with it. Plato would say, this is why so many modern relationships burn bright and die quickly, because they were built on emotional intoxication rather than truth. A love born from fantasy can only survive for as long as the fantasy remains unchallenged. Reality always wins eventually. Plato warns that initial attraction reveals more about your inner wounds than your inner wisdom. Your attractions are psychological diagnostics. You are drawn to what is familiar, not to what is good for you. This is why people with chaotic childhoods often seek chaotic partners. It is why people who never felt valued seek partners who withhold affection. Plato sees this as the soul reenacting its pain, trying to resolve it through repetition. To him, the first person you fall for is rarely the person your noble horse chooses. It is the person your wild horse recognizes. And Plato would argue that true love should begin not with attraction, but with discernment. It's easy to fall for beauty, charm, or charisma. It is much harder to fall for virtue, but only virtue creates lasting love. Beauty fades, novelty decays, excitement exhausts itself, but the character of a soul, its courage, its honesty, its wisdom, those are eternal. Plato believed that until you train your desires to be drawn toward the good, your relationships will continue to reproduce the same patterns, the same heartbreaks, the same self-destructions. Attraction must be educated before it can be trusted. Plato does not merely say that pleasure-driven lovers are weak, he says they are dangerous. They do not intend harm, but harm arises naturally from their priorities. When pleasure is the goal, the beloved becomes an instrument. When possession is the goal, the beloved becomes a territory. When gratification is the goal, the beloved becomes a resource. Plato emphasizes that pleasure-driven lovers fear the beloved's independence. They want them obedient, impressionable, emotionally dependent. Such lovers isolate, manipulate, flatter, and intoxicate with attention. not because they are evil, but because their appetites demand it. Plato compared these lovers to wolves who love lambs. The wolf does not wish to harm the lamb, yet harm is inevitable because of what the wolf is. And this is Plato's brutal truth. If someone is ruled by appetite, they cannot love you, they can only consume you. When the pleasure fades, they fade. When the novelty disappears, they disappear. Their promises evaporate because the promises were never rooted in commitment. They were rooted in desire. Plato's warning is not moral, it is predictive. Lovers ruled by appetite always leave destruction behind them, not because they choose to, but because they lack the inner structure to do anything else. Now we turn to one of Plato's most mystical ideas, that true love begins when beauty awakens the memory of the soul. According to Plato, every soul has witnessed the forms, the eternal truths, before descending into the body. One of these forms is absolute beauty. When a person encounters someone truly beautiful, not merely aesthetically pleasing, but beautiful in presence, the soul shudders, it trembles, it remembers. Plato describes this as a shock, a spiritual vertigo. Something ancient stirs inside you, as if your soul has recognized something it lost long ago. Physical beauty becomes a catalyst, a portal, a reminder of what you once knew when you were more than flesh. This is why philosophical lovers do not merely desire the beloved, they revere them. They feel awe, not hunger. They seek closeness, not consumption. The beloved's beauty does not inflame the appetites. It awakens the noble horse, stirring the desire for growth, virtue, and alignment with truth. For Plato, this moment, this trembling recognition, is the true beginning of love. It is not the body calling to the body, it is the soul calling to the soul. And it is an infinitely more dangerous, more transformative, and more sacred experience than desire could ever be. Many believe lust is dangerous because it overwhelms reason, but Plato believed philosophical love was far more terrifying because it overturns your entire conception of who you are. Lust seeks gratification. Philosophical love seeks transformation. Lust wants possession. Philosophical love wants elevation. Lust ends when the appetite is satisfied. Philosophical love has no end because its object, the soul, cannot be fully known or consumed. To love someone philosophically is to confront your own inadequacies. Their beauty exposes the gap between who you are and who you could be. Their goodness forces you to recognize your own deficiencies. Plato understood that this kind of love humbles before it heals. It strips the ego, it dissolves illusions, it demands that you grow or lose the beloved. Philosophical love requires effort, discipline, vulnerability, and moral courage. It asks you to reshape yourself. No wonder so few people choose it. Lust is easier, pleasure is easier. But ease has never been the path of the soul. Plato knew that the greatest terror in love is not rejection, it is exposure. To be loved for your beauty is flattering, but shallow. To be loved for your usefulness is transactional. But to be loved for your soul is unbearable unless you have made peace with who you are. Philosophical love demands transparency. It asks the lovers to reveal their insecurities, their ambitions, their contradictions, not in dramatic confessions, but through the simple, daily act of being truly known. Plato believed that the beloved becomes a mirror in which the lover sees not just goodness, but weakness. This is why many people prefer relationships based on desire. They allow you to hide, but philosophical love does not let you hide. It calls you forth, challenges you, exposes the fractures you pretend not to see. Plato's ideal lover and beloved do not merely admire each other, they refine each other. But refinement is painful. Growth is painful. To stand naked before another soul, without pretense or performance, is the most radical act Plato thinks a human can commit. To Plato, sex is not merely an act, it is an event inside the soul. He believes sexual pleasure was so powerful that it could rearrange a person's priorities, weaken judgment, and distort the inner balance that reason works tirelessly to maintain. Plato was not naive. He understood that sexual desire is intoxicating, overwhelming, and, if mismanaged, capable of reshaping identity itself. You think you're simply attracted to someone, but inside, a far older, more primal engine awakens. Plato saw sexual pleasure as a force of nature, not a simple preference. It surges through the appetitive part of the soul like a tidal wave. And once unleashed, it does not negotiate. It demands, it pulls, it consumes. This did not mean Plato condemned sex, but he distrusted the way human beings use it. He believed passion makes promises that the soul cannot keep. The body wants what it wants in the moment, and when that moment passes, clarity returns. Too late. To Plato, sex was not sinful, it was simply dangerous. Anything powerful enough to rewrite one's priorities in an instant must be handled with profound discipline. The world today teaches indulgence, spontaneity, surrendering to impulse. Plato would argue that this philosophy breeds chaos, not because desire is evil, but because human beings are not nearly as stable as they pretend to be. Plato describes a psychological event most people do not realize is happening when sexual desire arises. Reason does not vanish, it becomes silenced. The appetitive part of the soul expands into the space where reason normally operates, crowding it out. This is why people make decisions in moments of passion that contradict everything they believed earlier that day. Desire is persuasive, not logical. It does not argue, it overwhelms. This is why Plato insists that only individuals who have disciplined their appetites beforehand can survive the storm of passion without being carried away by it. Plato understood something about human psychology thousands of years before neuroscience confirmed it. Passion activates states that override rational evaluation. The frontal lobe quiets, impulse intensifies, and the person becomes a creature of the present moment. In Plato's framework, the noble horse loses traction, while the wild horse gains strength. The charioteer, your rational self, pulls the reins, but the horses do not listen. You become a passenger in your own life. And this is why Plato warns that sexual desire must be managed before you fall in love. Once the horses are galloping, discipline becomes almost impossible. Preparation is everything. Love at first sight, to Plato, is a confession, not of destiny, but of ungoverned appetite. It is the soul admitting that it has not trained itself to distinguish between beauty that uplifts and beauty that manipulates. First sight reveals your conditioning, not your character. When Plato examines the phenomenon, he sees something dangerously imbalanced, an entire emotional architecture built on a moment of involuntary reaction. The person who falls in love instantly is not necessarily romantic. They are vulnerable. They are susceptible to illusion. Their soul responds not to the beloved, but to the memory of something unresolved inside them. Plato would argue that if your heart races at the first moment you see someone, this is not a signal of compatibility. It is a sign that your inner horses are already out of balance. True love for Plato is not a lightning strike. It is a recognition. And recognition takes time, attention, understanding, and the slow revelation of another soul. Modern life treats sex as casual, recreational, even trivial. Plato treats sex as a force similar to fire, illuminating, transformative, and deeply destructive when mishandled. He believed that sexual activity reshapes the soul's internal balance. Each act reinforces a pattern of indulgence or restraint, of appetite or virtue. Because sexual pleasure is so intense, it forms memories that imprint deeply into the psyche. These memories condition what the person seeks in future relationships. Plato saw this conditioning as the root of relational dysfunction. A person who uses sex to soothe loneliness becomes addicted to using another's body as medicine. A person who uses sex for ego validation becomes dependent on seduction to feel worthy. Plato recognized that repeated indulgence creates spiritual habits, gradually turning the soul outward, seeking satisfaction rather than meaning, distraction rather than growth. Thus, Plato argued that sex should be intentional, not impulsive, meaningful, not mechanical, an expression of virtue, not appetite. Sexual restraint was not about repression, it was about preserving the integrity of the soul. He believed sex should be powerful, transformative, even tender but never casual, because nothing powerful remains harmless when treated recklessly. Plato's most beautiful idea about love is the ladder of beauty. It begins with physical attraction, but it does not end there. If the lover is wise, physical beauty awakens a deeper search. First, attraction to one body, then recognition of beauty in many bodies, then admiration for beautiful minds, beautiful laws, beautiful actions, beautiful knowledge. The lover ascends from flesh to meaning, from desire to philosophy. This ascent transforms love into a spiritual apprenticeship. Sex becomes a doorway, not a destination. The beloved becomes a reminder of something divine, not a possession to exploit. The lovers help each other climb a ladder that neither could ascend alone. And as they rise, their connection deepens, not because of physical intimacy, but because their souls become aligned in pursuit of the same truth. The tragedy for Plato is that most people get stuck on the first rung. They never move beyond the body. They fall in love with bodies, chase bodies, suffer for bodies, and lose themselves for bodies. But the body is only the beginning. Plato believed the true purpose of erotic love is to ignite the philosophical impulse, to awaken yearning for the eternal. To him, desire is not an obstacle. It is the spark that lights the path upward. Plato draws a brutal distinction between desire and devotion. Desire asks, "What can you give me?" Devotion asks, "Who can I become for your sake?" Desire consumes, devotion cultivates. Desire wants access. Devotion wants understanding. Desire reaches for the body. Devotion reaches for the soul. And Plato insists that the highest form of love transforms the lover into a better version of themselves, not through sacrifice, but through admiration. A lover driven by devotion sees the beloved's potential and longs to help it unfold. But devotion requires discipline. It requires the lover to manage their appetites so they do not diminish the beloved, but elevate them. Plato believed that this discipline, this inner governance, is the true test of love. If your love weakens the other person, it is not love. If your desire leads them away from virtue, it is not love. If your intimacy leaves them diminished rather than strengthened, it is not love. True love, for Plato, is not sentimental. It is demanding. It requires self-mastery. It requires courage. And above all, it requires the willingness to let the beloved become someone greater than you expected, even if that means greater than you. Plato warns that sexual attraction can be so overwhelming that it prevents us from seeing the person clearly. When desire dominates perception, the beloved's flaws become invisible, their contradictions excused, their character overlooked. This is not love, it is enchantment. Sexual chemistry, Plato insists, is the most intoxicating spell the body can cast over the soul. It creates a fog, a softness of judgment, a willingness to ignore incompatibilities because the physical connection feels extraordinary. To Plato, the danger is not sex itself. It is the confusion between intimacy and compatibility. A relationship built on desire alone becomes structurally unsound. When the sexual intensity fades, the lovers awaken to a partner they never actually knew. Modern culture experiences this constantly. Relationships that feel cosmic in the first months collapse under the weight of reality. Plato explains this collapse with remarkable simplicity. Passion revealed nothing about the soul. Plato describes a rare and breathtaking possibility. Two people who love each other, not through appetite, but through devotion. They admire one another's character, discipline one another's weaknesses, and awaken one another's virtues. They seek not possession, but elevation. Such lovers challenge one another to grow, to refine themselves, to purify their intentions, to pursue truth more earnestly. This kind of love is not fragile. It does not collapse under difficulty, because it was not built on pleasure. It was built on admiration, understanding, and a shared pursuit of the good. These lovers do not suffocate one another. They liberate one another, and their connection remains powerful even in the absence of physical intimacy, because the bond resides in the soul, not the body. Plato insists that this form of love is the closest two mortals can come to touching the divine. Plato does not stop at saying sexual desire can destabilize a person. He argues it can destabilize an entire society. To him, the true danger of ungoverned appetite is not private morality, but public consequence. A city is a reflection of the souls that inhabit it. If the souls are ruled by appetite, the city becomes chaotic, unpredictable, and vulnerable to manipulation. Plato believed excessive desire fractures the internal order a city needs to survive. Citizens driven by pleasure become untrustworthy, impulsive, and loyal only to their cravings. They do not form stable families, stable friendships, or stable commitments. Everything becomes temporary: partners, promises, allegiances. Plato warns that when desire becomes the ruling principle of society, it erodes discipline and promotes envy. A population obsessed with pleasure becomes weak, easily swayed by charismatic leaders who offer gratification rather than wisdom. This is why Plato feared sexual indulgence at a political level. It trains people to follow impulse rather than reason. It teaches the soul to surrender instead of govern. And a city where millions have learned to surrender is ripe for collapse. To Plato, a culture that worships pleasure is a culture that cannot defend itself. Not physically, not morally, not intellectually. The battle for the soul is also the battle for civilization. Section 32. Chastity, not as purity, but as power. Plato's arguments for chastity are often misinterpreted as prudish or moralistic. In truth, Plato saw chastity not as a virtue of purity, but a virtue of power. Chastity is the deliberate denial of the body's most persuasive instinct. It is proof that the soul governs the flesh, not the other way around. Plato believed this capacity to restrain appetite even at its strongest created a kind of inner sovereignty. The person who can govern sexual desire can govern anything. They become immovable, stable, capable of choosing what is good, even when the body protests violently. In this light, chastity becomes a form of training. It is not about suppressing desire. It is about proving to yourself that your identity does not depend on satisfying it. Chastity becomes a demonstration of self-discipline so intense that the appetites learn their proper place. Plato was not interested in moral purity. He was interested in creating a soul that could stand against anything, including itself. A person who can resist pleasure is a person who cannot be manipulated by it. Their internal architecture becomes unshakable. This is why Plato believes chastity forms strong, reliable, resilient lovers, not brittle ones. Plato understood something that modern culture dismisses. Sex feels significant because it is significant. Sexual intimacy creates psychological imprinting. It fuses the memory of pleasure with the image of the partner. This fusion becomes a blueprint the soul interprets as meaningful, even when the relationship itself is shallow or harmful. Plato believes sex binds the imagination to the beloved. It gives the appetitive horse more ammunition, more images, more sensations, more emotional leverage. This is why, after sex, people often feel more attached than they logically should. The soul has been shown a powerful experience, and strong experiences create strong bonds. Plato takes this connection seriously because he recognizes that sex can create illusions of compatibility where none exists. It can elevate a fling into a fantasy, a crush into an obsession, a stranger into a symbol. And when the fantasy collapses, the soul suffers a fall as dramatic as the ascent. Plato treats sex as soul alchemy, dangerous, transformative, and not to be used casually. Plato expresses a timeless idea. The body asks for what the soul cannot endure. The body wants immediate release. The soul wants long-term alignment. The body seeks pleasure. The soul seeks meaning. The body wants experience. The soul wants coherence. And so the two often work against each other. The body asks for someone who excites you. The soul begs for someone who steadies you. The body wants intensity. The soul wants intimacy. Plato believed most heartbreaks arise from ignoring the soul's requests. When the body chooses the relationship, the soul often walks into error. The body is impatient, impulsive, and easily persuaded. The soul requires patience, understanding, and truth. This is why so many people regret the partners they chose in moments of desire. Their soul had a different standard, but the body made the decision first. Plato's philosophy is not anti-body, it is pro-alignment. Desire must serve the soul, not sabotage it. Plato introduces a chilling insight. Some lovers want you weak, not because they hate you, but because your weakness benefits them. Pleasure-driven lovers are threatened by your growth. They fear your independence. They worry that if you become wiser or stronger, you will see through them and leave. So they keep you small. They flatter you excessively to weaken your ability to discern truth. They discourage your ambition so you remain dependent. They isolate you so they become your primary emotional reward. Plato speaks of lovers who make their beloved intentionally ignorant, fearful, and insecure. Not because they are malicious, but because their appetites demand ownership. To them, your growth is a danger. Your potential is a threat. Your independence is a rival. Plato describes these relationships as wolves loving lambs, a dynamic where intimacy and harm coexist. His warning is precise. If someone loves your pleasure more than your potential, they do not love you. Plato's highest form of love cannot exist between a strong soul and a weak one. It requires two charioteers who can govern their horses, two individuals who have disciplined their appetites, two lovers who admire each other's character, not just each other's beauty. Plato insists that philosophical love is reserved for those who have mastered themselves. Attraction alone is not enough. Chemistry is not enough. Even deep admiration is not enough. Unless both souls have achieved a state of inner stability, the love will collapse into imbalance. This is why Plato believes that good people have the best relationships, not because they are morally superior, but because their appetites do not sabotage the connection. They can love without consuming. They can desire without distorting. They can commit without enslaving. Plato is not describing a fairy tale love. He is describing a rigorous partnership that requires mutual discipline, mutual aspiration, and mutual responsibility. Philosophical love is not for the faint-hearted, it is for the self-governed. Plato ends this portion of his analysis with a devastating insight. People demand the kind of love they are not equipped to sustain. They want devotion while remaining undisciplined. They want loyalty while remaining impulsive. They want admiration while remaining stagnant. They want a partner who elevates them while refusing to elevate themselves. Plato would say, modern people do not suffer from a lack of love. They suffer from a lack of preparation for love. They ask for soul-level connection without developing soul-level character. They demand a partner who sees their potential while never cultivating it themselves. And so relationships fall apart, not because love is impossible, but because the lovers are unprepared. The lesson Plato gives us here is both severe and empowering. The quality of love you receive will mirror the quality of the soul you bring into the relationship. Plato does not believe virtue is something you perform. He believes it is something you protect. In his view, the soul contains a delicate structure, like a temple balanced on three sacred pillars: reason, spirit, and appetite. When these pillars align, the soul stands upright, coherent, luminous. But desire, unchecked, unexamined, unleashed, begins to gnaw at the foundation. Not with violence, but with seduction. Desire never storms the temple. It persuades the guards to lower their weapons. It whispers to appetite, "You deserve this." And appetite nods. It whispers to spirit, "No one will know." And spirit concedes. It whispers to reason, "You can justify it later." And reason, exhausted, retreats. To Plato, this is the true corruption of virtue. Not a catastrophic fall, but a gentle leaning, a gradual internal tilt, until one day the soul that once stood upright now bends toward appetite, like a vine that has grown toward the wrong sun. And the terrible thing about this corruption is that it feels like pleasure, not destruction. People do not notice they are decaying because desire makes decay feel rewarding. This is why Plato fears desire more than injustice, more than misfortune, more than ignorance. Those are external threats. Desire is an internal assassin. Plato makes a claim modern psychology is only now beginning to understand. Sexual desire can temporarily replace your identity. Not metaphorically, neurologically, psychologically, spiritually. When appetite becomes activated, the soul's hierarchy flips. The rational part weakens. The spirited part becomes reactive. The appetitive part expands, overshadowing everything else. Suddenly, the careful thinker becomes reckless. The disciplined person becomes impulsive. The moral individual becomes willing to compromise. Lust is not simply desire, it is possession. It takes hold of the chariot and drives it where it wishes to go. Plato is not scandalized by this, he is terrified by it, because he knows that a person in the grip of desire is not fully themselves. Their loyalties shift, their judgment shifts, their priorities shift. They begin making promises that the sober soul would never endorse. This is why so many relationships born in desire collapse. They were built by a temporary self, not the true one. Plato does not say desire is evil. He says it is unstable, and anything unstable cannot be the foundation of a life, much less of love. One of Plato's most haunting ideas is the possibility that the soul may crave someone who diminishes it. This is not a failure, it is a symptom of an inner conflict, unresolved, a wound unhealed, a need unmet. Plato suggests that souls drawn toward destructive lovers are reenacting their internal disorder. The wild horse recognizes the wild horse. The ungoverned seeks the ungoverned. The insecure seek the withholding. The chaotic seek the chaotic. In this sense, attraction becomes a confession. You are drawn not to what will elevate you, but to what reflects the fractures inside you. Plato would argue that the beloved who harms you simply mirrors the part of your soul you have not disciplined. This makes such relationships intoxicating. They feel fated. But what feels like destiny may simply be dysfunction finding its echo. Plato gives a brutal warning. If your lover weakens you, the relationship is telling you something about yourself. Plato makes a claim that cuts through millennia. You cannot love someone else well if you do not govern yourself. Modern culture romanticizes emotional chaos. Lovers who are overwhelmed, consumed, destabilized by each other. To Plato, this is not romance, it is slavery. If your desires control you, you cannot offer anything stable to another soul. You bring instability into the relationship. You bring confusion, contradiction, and volatility. Love becomes a battlefield, not because love is violent, but because the lovers are untrained warriors. Self-mastery to Plato is not asceticism, it is readiness. Readiness to love without losing yourself. Readiness to give without collapsing. Readiness to desire without being overtaken. The lover who governs themselves becomes a sanctuary, the kind of person whose presence calms rather than inflames. In Plato's world, the highest erotic offering is not passion, it is stability. Plato would look at modern relationships, hypersexualized, impulsive, dopamine-driven, and say, "I warned you." He predicted a culture where desire would be confused for love, where pleasure would be mistaken for compatibility, where access to bodies would become easier than knowledge of souls. He foresaw a society where people would become addicted to erotic stimulation, always searching for a new lover, a new thrill, a new intensity, never realizing that the problem's not the partner's, but the undisciplined part of their own soul. Plato believed that when sex becomes easy, love becomes hard. When desire becomes abundant, devotion becomes rare. When pleasure becomes the priority, purpose becomes optional. And without purpose, human beings wander from partner to partner, from fantasy to fantasy, from high to high, never anchoring, never transforming, never finding peace. The crisis of modern love is not technology, not culture, not opportunity. It is appetites without governance. And Plato believes lovers are meant to be each other's teachers, not teachers of worldly knowledge, but of virtue. A philosophical lover does not merely compliment your beauty, they refine your character. They demand truthfulness because falsehood collapses the soul. They require discipline because impulsiveness corrupts it. They encourage growth because stagnation suffocates it. They challenge your weaknesses, not to shame you, but to free you from them. This is why Plato's lovers do not rely on sexual intimacy to deepen the bond. The bond deepens through shared striving, through mutual correction, through spiritual companionship. A lover should awaken your best self, not indulge your worst. A lover should elevate your aspirations, not reassure your mediocrity. A lover should help you ascend, not enable your descent. In Plato's world, love is not an escape from discipline. It is a practice of it. To Plato, abstinence is not deprivation, it is clarity. When lovers wait, desire becomes purified. The appetitive noise quiets. The noble horse gains strength. The soul becomes more perceptive. Sexual restraint forces the lovers to confront who the other person truly is. Without the fog of passion, they see the beloved's character, their temperament, their values, their ambitions. If love remains without sex, Plato argues, then the connection is real. If love collapses without sex, then the connection was never love. It was appetite wearing the mask of affection. Plato believed that abstinence acts as a filter. Only relationships rooted in admiration, respect, and philosophical alignment survive it. Anything based on impulse withers. Anything based on beauty alone decays. Anything based on fantasy dissolves. Waiting to Plato is not about morality. It is about the protection of the soul. One of the most poetic and misunderstood aspects of Plato's philosophy is his reverence for longing. For him, longing is not suffering. It is illumination. To long for someone is to recognize their beauty, not to consume it. Longing sharpens appreciation. It expands attention. It awakens self-reflection. It pulls the soul upward, encouraging growth in the space between desire and fulfillment. Possession, by contrast, often weakens love. When lovers rush into gratification, they reduce the beloved to an object of appetite. The mystery evaporates, the reverence fades, the distance collapses, and with it, the philosophical energy that made the relationship transformative. Plato does not say lovers should never possess each other. He says they should learn to value longing, because longing reveals what desire cannot, the capacity for reverence. And now, as the hour grows late and the world outside your window softens into its quiet shape, let us settle into the last question Plato leaves us with, one that drifts through his dialogues like a whisper in the dark. Plato believed that the true test of a person is not taken in sunlight, when discipline is easy and clarity is abundant. No, he believed the test comes here, in these hours when the mind softens, when your guard drops, when the appetites stir, when memories and fantasies blur at the edges. It is here that the wild horse awakens. It is here that the noble horse strains. And it is here, in this private battlefield, that the charioteer must decide who he is. You must decide who you are, because Plato's final truth is painfully simple. Desire reveals your architecture. Love reveals your courage. and your choices reveal your soul. Most people never learn to hold themselves steady in the presence of beauty. They rush, they chase, they devour. And in the process, they lose the very thing beauty was meant to awaken. Not hunger, but memory. Not possession, but reverence. Not chaos, but ascent. Plato wanted you to understand that every attraction is a doorway. Every longing is a message. Every desire is an invitation to rise or to fall. The beloved is not just a person, they are a mirror. They show you who you've been, they show you who you fear, and if the gods permitted, they show you who you might become. But the choice, Plato says, is always yours. Will you be governed by the part of you that hungers, or the part of you that hopes? By impulse or meaning? By appetite or alignment? It is not wrong to desire. Plato never said that. He only warned that unexamined desire transforms passionate hearts into haunted ones. He warned that the soul becomes what it repeatedly chases, and he begged us, across centuries, across languages, to chase what elevates us, not what empties us. So tonight, before you close your eyes, before sleep drifts in and dissolves the boundary between your waking self and the quiet truth beneath it, ask yourself, which part of me led my choices? Which desires shaped my steps? And if you do not like your answers, Plato would tell you this: you are not ruined, you are simply unfinished. The soul, he believed, is always in motion, always rising or falling, always shaping itself, always possible. So, breathe. Release the weight of everything you cannot carry into tomorrow. Let the mind soften, let the chariot rest, and let tonight be a gentle turning. Because no matter where you've been, or who you've loved, or how desire has wounded or awakened you, you can begin again, you can govern again, you can elevate again. The gods, Plato said, gave us love not to break us, but to rebuild us, piece by piece, choice by choice, night by night. And if you listen closely here in this quiet hour, you may feel something stirring within you. The faint beating of wings, the memory of beauty, the first trembling hint of who you were always meant to become. Good night, my friend. Until the next lecture. May your soul choose the upward path,